All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wild Ventures Fireside Chat event. I'm so happy to see everybody here tonight. A lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces. So I'm really happy to see that the community of cybersecurity entrepreneurs that we at Wild Ventures engage with is growing over time. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and I hope you will enjoy the panel. So this is, first of all, it's a great opportunity for me to thank the Wild Ventures Israel team, Sharon, Lior, and Itzan for making this event happen. So thanks, guys. Yeah, they deserve it. You're doing a great job. And also for all the entrepreneurs and soon-to-be entrepreneurs here in the crowd. Obviously, we want to know you and get to know you better and hear more interesting ideas. We're actively looking for investments, so just grab myself or anybody from our team. We'll be happy to talk with you. By the way, we're live on Facebook, so feel free to...
Really?
Yeah. So think carefully about everything that you say. FYI. Yeah.
There's a whole section I call it.
Yeah.
That changes everything.
So guys, feel free to tweet and share and post and do something on social media. Sharon, our marketing director, will highly appreciate it. Thanks again. I want to say to our sponsors tonight, so ClearSky Security, Paladin Capital Group, and Proofpoint. Before we start the panel, I'm happy to say that our panelists will say a few words. So maybe Jay from ClearSky, introduce yourself and your firm.
So my name is Leek. I'm still a recovering CISO for the rest of my life, turned venture capitalist. So we're a $300 million fund dedicated to investing in early stage security companies. Done 3 deals here in Israel this year alone. Very excited to be here, and I promise I will put you all to sleep tonight.
Wow. Excellent. So from Paladin Capital Group, Gib Witham will say a few words about the firm.
Sure. Gib Witham, and kind of the content tonight will be coming from Dr. Mary Aiken, one of our strategic advisors, but we're Paladin Capital. We're a global cybersecurity investment fund, founded about 16, 17 years ago. We have about $1 billion committed across 4 funds. Recently, as an update, closed an investment here in Corumba with our new co-investors and partners, Wild Ventures, and looking forward to more activity here as well. Excellent.
And representing Proofpoint, Yair Greenlinger, who was formerly CEO and co-founder of a company called Wild Ventures portfolio company that got acquired by Proofpoint. So, Yair.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ofer and Wild Ventures, for giving us the opportunity to participate. We're here to let everybody know. We want to make sure everybody knows that Proofpoint is very active in Israel. We have an R&D center, a security research center, and for anyone in the room that is with a startup, we are partnering with a lot of startups. We have acquired so far 15, 16 companies, and we are very active looking for additional partnerships and acquisitions in the space. And for those of you who look for a job and want to be part of something very, very interesting that happens in Israel right now, that's a place to be. So looking forward to speak with all of you. Thank you.
And well, for those of you who are less familiar with Wild Ventures, so we are a VC firm with offices in Silicon Valley and Tel Aviv. We invest in Israeli startups in seed stage, so as early as possible. Currently investing from our 3rd fund. It's a $75 million fund that we raised about a month and a half ago. Cybersecurity is our top investment field, but we're also looking at other fields like enterprise software, autonomous vehicles, drones, and AR/VR. Typical investment size of between $2 to $3 million in seed. We lead the seed round, and we always participate in follow-on rounds as well. We're quite active with all our portfolio companies, very hands-on investor. And what we do best is connecting strong Israeli tech entrepreneurs with the US market, with a lot of introductions to customers, partners, follow-on financing as well, and potential acquirers. So we're very actively looking for more investments. So let's have a quick round of introductions for the great panelists over here, and then we'll go with start with the questions. Andy.
Hi, I'm Ellis. I'm the Chief Security Officer for Akamai Technologies, which mostly means I make the internet suck less. I'm a not yet recovering CISO, but I'm a pre-recovery. Yeah, but I'm a recovering Air Force officer and recovering sommelier. So I've got some. So I will say the Cabernet is fantastic tonight.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Mark Goodman. I'm with the venture capital group at MassMutual in Boston. MassMutual is a Fortune 100 financial services company, started as a life insurance company 160 years ago, and acquired asset management businesses like Oppenheimer along the way. We're a young group. We're about 3 years old, done 17 investments, all in the U.S. But this is my third trip to Israel in the last 8 months, so I'm working hard to find the right fit for us, and always very happy to be here and hosted by YL, who are always very generous hosts.
My name is Professor Mary Aiken. I'm a forensic cyberpsychologist. So cyberpsychology is the study of the impact of technology on human behavior. Forensic cyberpsychology is criminal, deviant, and abnormal aspects of behavior manifested online. In terms of criminality, I also try and make the internet suck less.
Hey, that's a tough intro to follow. I'm Hugh Thompson, Chief Technology Officer of a reasonably sized but growing startup called Symantec. Very, very excited to be here. It is just amazing the things that are coming out of this community. So excited to be a part of it, and we've recently launched Symantec Ventures. So we're looking to partner with great folks like our hosts here in funding some really great ideas. So thanks.
Yeah, okay, great. So many questions that I wrote here. I know that I'm not going to cover everything, and I want to save some time for Q&A from the audience as well. So let's start with the current question, ransomware. So we're all familiar with WannaCry. It happened a few months ago, and now we have Petya or not Petya. Still maybe Petya, that's the name. So just a broad question. I mean, it hit large companies as well. We're talking about Merck and Maersk and other large corporates. And what's going to be with ransomware? I mean, what's the future going to be for this trouble?
So I think this was really interesting because this isn't ransomware. It looks like ransomware, but this isn't ransomware. Right? They're not trying to collect money. They're not providing a vehicle. Right? If you get, ransomware campaign, this is somebody who's trying to do denial of service, not through bandwidth overload, but through take out systems. And in fact, there's no real way to actually pay for not Petya. So I think what we're actually seeing here is it's a move toward sponsored, we don't yet know. Attribution is hard, but given the initial vector was basically hit every Ukrainian business, that you can kind of decide sort of have an interest there. So I think we're starting to see warfare waged through the cyber means at this point.
Mary, perhaps you'd like to say a few words from your unique perspective.
I think that anybody who's interested in monitoring trends should actually have a look at the annual Europol IOCTA report, which is Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment. And of course, the prediction there was that ransomware would become more prolific. Last week, on sort of a variation on a theme in terms of extortion, Interpol or Europol, we released a report to show a surge in sextortion attacks on children from the age of 6. And for lots of money, it's for pocket money. You see compromising a child, getting an 11-year boy to think that he's talking to a 14-year-old girl and then holding him effectively to ransom for his weekly pocket money, with organized actually facilitating this banks of equipment. So I think that my general comment, and I always bring it back down to a developmental piece, because these problems, we have to stop looking at them in silos and actually think about the bigger picture. And every government and every police force has to think where on the spectrum of total order and total disorder they're going to position themselves. And I would argue as a cyber psychologist that in cyberspace we're moving towards disorder. And I think we have to really think about, well, what's the tipping point in terms of economic warfare? At what point are we going to say enough? Late NATO last year declared cyberspace as a domain of operations. That's a domain of war. So yet we have no protocols to deal with global events.
You know, maybe just a quick comment on ransomware in general. I think what we've seen over these last few years is increasing creativity in how to monetize big infrastructures, big attack infrastructures. In the beginning, it was, hey, let me rent you a botnet. We're going to send out a bunch of spam. We may allow you to do a DDoS attack. Maybe we'll even give you an SLA around that DDoS attack. Now we're seeing ransomware is a very interesting thing to do if you have a footprint on a device. But some of the things that we're seeing coming down the pike in the future is the aggregation of a bunch of healthcare information. And you think about that and you wonder, you know, how do you monetize that on scale? And there's signals that there's an infrastructure coming out similar to ransomware in the sense that it's protection money to keep this medical secret about you safe. And you know, if you don't want to maybe keep that secret safe, perhaps we will go out and we will post it on a large social media site. So we're seeing the bigger build out of infrastructure to try and monetize these attacks and these big data breaches in different ways. So it's a very interesting time I see in that space on that front.
And I think the point is at the moment, while these sort of attacks remain in the corporate sector, everybody goes, well, okay, they're businesses, you can look after yourself. But I think when that moves to general population and with increasing connectivity, I think at that point society will sit up and say, well, just a minute, you know, I don't want to be held to ransom because I've got some sort of disease that I thought was private, and now all of a sudden, if I don't pay this, you know, my insurance premium is going to be affected. But it comes back to that premise of governance in a cyber context.
Just shifting gears a little on the ransomware side. I mean, so when WannaCry came out on Friday, I think, like 9 o'clock on Saturday, I had a friend of mine who works in the SEC. He's like, Jay, I got a call with the chairman of the SEC tomorrow at 9 a.m. and I got to tell him what we could have done to prevent this from happening. I said, patch. It came out March 2017, 3 months ago. He goes, I know that's the answer, but that's not what he wants to hear. I need to talk to somebody that's going to tell me what I need to tell him that's going to make him feel better. I was like, okay, here's some people you can call. But you know, my point is that, I mean, some of these things are so basic and fundamental, but we're never going to get it right. You already gave up on the right answer before. So I don't know, go back to the psychological thing. I know it's a little different the way you do, but like, there's an opportunity here, I guess, for us to innovate, but also there's an opportunity for us to bring us back to the things that actually work, some of those fundamentals.
Okay, and a question starting with you, Andy, as the only CISO here on the panel, surprisingly. Broad question: what are the main challenges that keep you and your peers awake at night?
Well, this week, jet lag, actually.
It is challenging.
It's really challenging. Like, it takes me an hour a day for every hour of a time zone shift. I'm going to be in Israel for 7 days, and it's 7 hours off of Boston. So I will adjust and go home. So I think the hardest thing actually comes back to Jay's comment, which is 90% of security is blocking and tackling, right? It's the mental skills, like go patch. And you say go patch, and it sounds like it's this easy thing that people could just go do if only they cared enough to go do it. But that's not the reality, right? The reality is in every enterprise, once it's bigger than 3 people, you have a bunch of systems that you know what they are. And you patch those, and you're fine, right? That's your production infrastructure. Like, it gets maintained, it's great. Maybe it's all your laptops. And then there's the systems that, oh, wait, you can't update that because it's running this database to support that application server, but the database doesn't run under Windows 10, so we've still got that on Windows XP because we haven't upgraded the database yet. And now you got to remember, do we pay for the XP early subscription? And that's not even the part that keeps me up at night. The part is those systems that we don't know what they are. Right, that some developer stood up a system a long time ago, it's at the back end of some important information chain, and it got abandoned. And the easy thing has been, at least I used to be able to walk into a data center, or you send somebody into a data center, I haven't done one in a while, and you would literally walk down and say, show me each of these devices on your inventory. And so at the very least, somebody couldn't lose a machine. Well, with virtualization, you can't do that. Like I can walk in and say, tell me what that machine is. And they're like, well, that's virtual server 72. It has a bunch of stuff on it. How do I know it's on that one right now? And this becomes a hard problem. So I think the avenues for entry into an enterprise are growing. And I think too many people believe in firewalls still. I think we're in a world where you must assume that every device is open and accessible on the internet. And if that scares you and you say, oh my God, I can't trust this, well, that should cause you to reevaluate what you do for security.
I'll just add to that. In terms of the psychology of what you're describing of, I know I should update this, but I've got something else running and it's just too much work. We describe that as cognitive dissonance. So you've got two choices. You know, I like to smoke, but I know it's bad for me, but I like to smoke. You know, I like to drink, I have a few glasses of wine, I know it's bad for me, but, you know, the merit. So I think that's essentially a very human entity, is to take the choice that you know there are two options, but you go with the one that's easier. The other thing about humans is the habit. So we are creatures of habit, and over time we will take shortcuts. We will repeat behavior, but we'll also take shortcuts. So, I mean, everybody's aware of the cracking of the Enigma code. That came down to, it was a very sophisticated piece of equipment, and the operators basically got lazy. So instead of scrambling all of the encryption forward one, and they said, okay, well, and that's effectively part of the reason why it was cracked. But the same thing is, say, for passwords. So you can apply what happened with the cracking of the Enigma code to password use. So guarantee somebody in this room, the beginning of their password is the name of their pet. And guarantee the numbers at the end of the password are something like 10. And guarantee when you're updating it, it goes ratchet to memory. So I like to say, you know, the memory may be weak, but your passwords need to be strong.
No, horrible advice. I want to take that back. Since live streaming, any advice about passwords that is not right now, your password should be owned by a password vault, not you. If you have any password memorized, other than unlocking the screensaver on your device, you're doing it wrong. Get out of the business of memorizing passwords. And if you're building an infrastructure for network login, no passwords. This day and age, adding network login passwords is the cardinal sin.
Personal passwords.
No, even corporate passwords. Like, we're in a position as a company where we're moving all of our apps to passwordless authentication. Because that's how almost everybody is getting in, whether they're doing phishing, spear phishing attacks, account takeover, they're relying on the fact that we reuse passwords, eliminate the password, make it be a certificate and a push-based authentication.
Jay, it seems like you have something to comment.
No, I mean, I'm just letting go. You know, I'm excited here, so I'm jazzed up. I'm going to go update my password right now. See you guys.
That's not the mic.
But here's
but you know, I'm going to summarize what you guys said. Because what I was going to say before you guys, you guys are making 2 points, but you're not nailing it, right? The number one thing, I ran security for 3 companies over the past 18 years, and I can tell you the number one thing that kept me awake at night is the number one most important asset in every single one of those companies, and it's the freaking people, right? And basically everything you're talking about is human error, right? And human carelessness, human error, get my job done, I don't have time for this shit, I gotta do that, I gotta do this, I gotta do something else. And, you know, and they sacrifice, you know, enterprise risk, enterprise security risk for the convenience, basically. And people make those decisions day in and day out. And that's the summary, I think, of both of the points you're making.
Actually, I disagree. The aviation safety teaches us something really important. Why do all planes crash? Pilot error. And you know what they say about pilot error? That pilot error is a symptom of a system in need of redesign. If your human is causing a problem, it's because you did a bad job at designing the security controls.
Yeah, but more people died from donkey accidents in 2013 than from aviation accidents. Okay, fact.
We really need to redesign those donkeys.
That's a mic drop. That is a mic drop.
Yeah, I got that off of what's the public radio or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not true.
sure there's a team in Israel working on this problem.
How do you know this donkey statistic off the... Wow, that's amazing.
Everybody's Googling that.
This is unverified.
Campbell's not talking about Campbell.
I was mistaken. You're in the ballpark of the right animal. But, you know, I just want to double down on what Jay said without disagreeing with Andy. So I'm kind of brokering a peace agreement between
My analysts. But it really is fascinating to look at how little, as an industry, we've invested in that human element. Yes. That part is very scary. If you think about, is it easier for somebody to make a secure choice? Generally, for somebody like my mom, it's much easier for her to make an insecure choice. And we give her unfair choices to make. She's got an Android phone and she just wants to download an app to shoot some birds and some pigs. That's all she wants to do. And it asks, can you allow this app to access your security logs? Can it access your location? Can it access your payments? She's not in a position to make that kind of trade-off. She just doesn't know what she's giving up on the other side. But she knows if she hits OK, she can start playing the game. So I think that design in security, design in software to make it easier to make the more secure choice for my mom is a place of amazing opportunity.
I'd love to do it for your mom, but I wonder for the people in this room. Like, how many...
Are you going negative against my mom?
No.
Is that what you're trying to say? Are you trying to say
I'm
my mom is not as important?
Well, you're the one who brought up your mom. Okay, all right. So, no, but how many people in this room have been told by a security officer, have heard them say at some point, some variant of, don't click shit as a security control, right? We tell you, don't click shit, you'll get compromised. Don't click links. Don't click attachments. Don't do this. How many HR departments, your first day in the company, email you a set of PDFs with links to third-party websites so that you can go sign up for whatever the benefits package is, and your payroll department does it? The biggest thing that I fear is the irrelevance of the security team when it gives advice that is impractical. It's not even that the systems are bad. We tell people things that they can't act on. And when that happens, they learn something really quickly. Like, they're fast learning, as Mary's pointed out, and what they learn is that the security person is not there to help them. We're just there to tell them that they're bad people.
Yeah. So Paladin have a company that they've invested in called FishMe, which actually has a very good, when we talk about human factors in cybersecurity, it's got a very good system for actually training people by effectively, spamming their own employees and then see who clicks. And when they do, there's like, shouldn't have done that. Now you're going to have to go back and, So there's an instant sort of a conditioned feedback, which actually will help in human terms and sort of that educational piece. But just as an aside, when a study was done as to who clicked on the greatest number of things or opened the greatest number of attachments that they shouldn't have in a corporation, it was found actually that the legal department were the ones that were most at fault.
Like, we're a FishMe customer. We love them. But if you just buy a phishing company like that who's going to help identify your poor folks, and you don't go to your HR department and your finance department and say, stop sending this stuff. Like, the FishMe is taking your emails and just changing the link to a bad one and sending it back out to the employees. Stop. And so that's been far more effective for us, is we don't send users things that train them to click links, so that then when we send them something that trains them not to click links, they don't have cognitive dissonance trying to figure out what message we want to send them.
So let's continue talking about the challenges and opportunities in cybersecurity, and now maybe from the investor's point of view. So question for you, Mark. Wild Ventures keeps investing in security, but if you look, you see that almost any security sector can be regarded as red ocean. So many vendors, maybe too many vendors in so many different sectors. So from your point of view, what are some interesting greenfield opportunities in cybersecurity, sectors which are interesting but less crowded?
I don't think there are any greenfield opportunities.
Thank you. Next question.
Was automated IR, became security orchestration, automation, whatever you want to call it, and there are, of course, differences. Before that market even got a chance to get big, you had tons of new entrants. And I think a lot of areas of security are quite mature, actually. And so, from a venture capital point of view, I think there's not a lot of opportunity there. There might be growth and IPO opportunity, hopefully. But I think we might be in a period of consolidation, which, by the way, I'm an active investor in early stage cybersecurity, and I'm not holding back. I'm really, carefully examining spaces. Cyber deception, kind of interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting approaches in Israel, especially around deception. I just don't know that I would call it greenfield at this point. So, Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to say I think there are a few areas that are underserved. I'll answer the question from a different way, though. I think the number one most unmanaged risk in corporate America, in the world today, rather, is third-party risk. It's a massively underserved, very, very difficult problem, and Mark and I happen to both be investors in a company, so it sounds a little, I'm saying it despite the fact we still invest in what we think is a great company. There's just a ton of room for innovation, and I think we're starting to scratch the surface, and I believe it's the most unmanaged risk because it's the hardest problem to solve. Your third, your fourth, your fifth, your supply chain risk, things you don't even know that touch you, and how that can expose you. So that's number one. I think there's opportunity there well beyond anything that's in the market. And then the other thing that, really keeps me awake at night, and I've got to figure out the right way to say this so it doesn't sound too, buzzwordy, but we are all more interconnected to cloud-based solutions, and CASB and bullshit like that doesn't solve any of the problems. There's no real solution. Sorry, with the exception of Elastica, okay? Yes, with the exception of Elastica, CASB, no. They address a piece of the problem, okay? They don't address the full solution. And the way, as you see companies now, if I started a company today, I would have nothing on-prem. I had everything in the cloud, all SaaS services, born in the cloud company, right? And when you start thinking about things that way, and you start thinking about that at scale, like I have a portfolio company at Blackstone, there's an 8,500 person company in healthcare, and their goal is to have no one ever to connect to the corporate network ever again. They've got it down to 500 people out of 8,500 people. We're talking about healthcare, right? And those are only sysadmins. And so the way you have to think about how you orchestrate your program whenever you're living in the cloud. So I'm not talking about cloud security. I'm talking about living in the cloud, living anywhere. I think there's a lot of room for innovation there. And then the final thing that I'll mention is there's a trifecta that I've been talking about now for 5 years that is still bubbling. It's only gotten worse. And that you have a 22-year-old analyst in finance that knows more about Python and development and whatever than many of your developers know that are 50 years old working in your R&D team, much less your help desk or whatever. You have the increasingly mobile user, which is kind of what I referred to, right? And you have an expectation that I can have access to data anywhere, anytime, any place, whenever I want it, immediately on any device I want it, because I think I need it, whether I really need it or not. I don't give a shit. I want it right now, right? So smart people, increasingly mobile, instant gratification. Those three things have been coming together for the past 5 years, and we have not bubbled yet. So however you solve that problem, there's a ton of room for innovation there as well. So I don't think we can think about like the sector or whatever, but you got to think about it like, what are the problems that organizations are dealing with? How are people working differently right now? And there's tons of greenfield there.
I think as well, we can look at, well, where are the opportunities in terms of new sectors? But we can also say, well, where are the opportunities in terms of a better approach to existing problems? So, cure for cancer, that's been around for a long time. People are saying that's an old sector. They're just actually looking at, smarter ways to look for a cure. I think if we double back and just, again, this is from a sort of a behavioral science point of view, if we look at a classic, you spoke about deception, if you look at a classic insider threat problem, to come up with methodologies that actually closer reflect human behavior rather than an approximation of human behavior. And I'll give an example. There's one piece of software, I won't say who, but it's a well-known product that was developed. And to baseline that particular product, allegedly, a number of people, a number of people within an organization were asked to go undercover and act as if they were insiders for a period of time. So effectively, that created the baseline. Oh, this is what insider threat behavior looks like. And then whenever that product was applied, if the behavior started to look like the baseline behavior, then that would flag up this is potentially an insider threat. Now, this, in effect, is actually fake science, because if you ask somebody to go undercover and act like an insider, the very human thing that is missing, first of all, is motive. So they have no motive to act like an insider other than they've been asked to do it. So therefore, the sort of things that they might access or steal or compromise, there's no motive behind it. So it's probably random. If I have to think like an insider, maybe I should steal this, or maybe I should steal this, or what would an insider do? So that's the first thing. And the second thing from a human perspective as well is there's no consequences to their action if they've been asked to do this for a period of time. So they're not going to lose their job and they're not going to go to jail. So the chances are that that particular product is not only unhelpful, but it's likely that it's 180 degrees wrong. And effectively could be, could give a company a false sense of security in terms of they might be actually monitoring something that is fake. So I think it's very important to actually, anybody who's in a startup is actually, I would say, the next evolution is to get some form of behavioral scientist, some form of person who's got knowledge of contemporary behavioral science working on your team, because I think that interdisciplinary approach is really what's going to open up market opportunity and a better understanding of human behavior, but an understanding of human behavior that can actually translate into the mathematical models that inform the algorithms that will actually inform, say, the artificial intelligence technologies or whatever software that you're going to use. And for me, I think that's really the next step.
All right. Let's put focus on one of the most crowded spaces in security, which is the endpoint security, or the EDR. Only last week, we've seen the biggest fundraising in Israel for a security company. Cyber Reason raised $100 million. Where is the endpoint security going? Perhaps we'll start with you, Hugh, and let the others.
As you can imagine, I really like endpoint and feel very bullish about the future. And I think what's very interesting about that space is that for a long time, you saw corporate infrastructure do the protection. And then we've seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and it's accelerating, a move for people to use cloud-based services. I mean, I can't think of a company that hasn't either moved to Office 365, has thought about move to Office 365, is in the middle of a contract to move to Office 365. That's an amazing shift when you think about that user being now untethered from a set of infrastructure that used to protect them in the past. So there will be circumstances where there's infrastructure still around them, and then there will be other circumstances where there really isn't. And that puts an amazing amount of pressure on the endpoint. The endpoint becomes much more important in that ecosystem. What used to be the last line of defense may be the line of defense. So I think that that's a very fascinating space. Obviously, we've seen a lot of innovation. We've seen a lot of very creative ideas. We're investing very heavily in that space, as you can imagine. But what I also think is really interesting, and this goes back to that previous question that you asked around greenfield opportunities still in security, I do think that there is an underinvestment in privacy. And the reason I say that, and why is that relevant to this endpoint discussion, we need to care more and more about the security hygiene of employees outside of the business context. Because often those employees don't even know when they're switching persona. How many times have you seen somebody, you're inside of a room, you've had a great meeting, you've done a bunch of stuff on the whiteboard, a bunch of IP is up there, maybe some really sensitive data, maybe some really interesting passwords, and somebody's like, dude, I don't have time to write all this stuff down. Click, from personal iPhone, it's synced to their 6-year-old iPad at home, it's popping up all over the place. They are thinking purely about productivity. So with that in mind, and that's great, right? But with that in mind, we now have a vested interest in the company in their security hygiene in general. Why is privacy relevant in that? How are we going to convince somebody to install an agent provided by their company on that personal iPad that they just spent a fortune for? Well, I think the only way that you do it is that you make advancements in privacy so that it's very, very clear, and it's not just technology, it's also visual cues on when, what data is being given to whom. And then I think we can make incredible advancements in this space.
I'm going to agree and take it one step further. When we did, Hugh was so afraid.
Gone either way. That could have gone either way.
ADR
Okay,
was the end of the world. No, so yesterday, or was it yesterday? Yesterday when we had the startup competition, one of the questions I wanted to ask, we ran out of time of one of the companies. They said, look, we're just going to send an alert to the user in their home when there's a problem. And I wanted to say, I said, and what do you expect them to do? Right? And if you think about like your average user, they get a security alert, and the question you have to ask, and literally you, those of you who are going to be entrepreneurs, is what is the user going to do with that alert? And if we go back and look at how humans evolved attention, and we go back 700 million years, where we diverged from the Hydra. For those of you not familiar with the Hydra, it's a jellyfish.
They're a very large, I'm just saying, I brought this up in this group before. I saw a very large,
still terrified.
very large jellyfish on the beach
The
yesterday.
jellyfish is very interesting because it has sensors all over its body to detect when it has been touched. It has no way to distinguish which one is talking. So if you push a jellyfish, it has a bunch of sensors that say, I'm not being touched, and a bunch that say, I'm being touched, and the jellyfish doesn't know which ones are being touched and which ones aren't. And the reason for that is there's no evolutionary advantage for the jellyfish to know if it's being pushed from the right or the left, because the only thing a jellyfish can do is blurp, right? It's like, I've been touched, let me run away, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And for our users, often that's the trade-off we give them, right? You go to a website and it pops up a button that says, this SSL certificate is not trusted. What would you like to do? Continue or not get your job done? What do we expect them to do? And I think there's this huge opportunity on the end point to say, how do we give them an experience that lets them be safe, where we don't make them choose between two bad choices, and where we can protect them from a larger range of things. Mary brought up the insider threat. If you've read the Microsoft inclusivity guidelines, it was not even about security. It says, look, if you're designing software for somebody with only one arm, and you go look at how many people on the planet have only one arm, it's like 115,000 people. It's growing, but it's not that big. You would never design for that economically. However, if you design for people with only one arm, you will catch the people who are temporarily disabled, think people with broken arms. They only have one arm, it's only for 6 weeks, but it'll work for them. And you'll catch the people who are situationally disabled, think people carrying around a newborn in one arm while they're working. Like I did that for 6 weeks, that was a really entertaining thing. And on the security side, when we talk about the insider threat, does the insider threat actually look any different than somebody who's had their system taken over remotely? It's the same problem. If you can solve on this device you shouldn't be able to do bad things, you simultaneously solve the insider threat as well as solving the outsider threat. And so we need to start thinking about how do we have broad spectrum defenses that enable our users to get their job done. Our goal as security professionals, which includes those of you who will found security companies, is to enable our businesses to make wiser risk decisions. Our job is not to stop things, it's not to reduce risk. It's to enable wiser risk choices because businesses take risk. That's what they exist to do. We don't eliminate it. We just don't want them to do dumb things that aren't profitable. The risks they take should make money or further the mission of the business.
I have just a comment which is sort of more philosophical than anything. I always get the feeling in these conversations that effectively we're just trying to stick our fingers in the dam, over here. I just find it so overwhelmingly depressing because it's sort of, let's patch this here, plug this here, but there's this, growing tsunami of problems, effectively. And, we're constantly saying, the human is the weakest link and the human this, and, we're constantly praising the machine and saying the machine does this, but look what the human does. And I think we're forgetting the hierarchy somewhat, in terms of, who counts on the planet just at the moment. So I think that, when we look at, say, moving from Internet of Things to Internet of Everything, we're not going to be just talking about attack on critical infrastructure. We're going to be talking about attack on all infrastructure, including your mother's devices. And
Very worried.
but the point is that let's start, thinking about it differently for a minute. Instead of sort of trying to fix everything at this end and gilding the lily on top and another new shiny piece of whatever it is on top of this creaky, not fit for purpose architecture that underpins, that is the internet, is there any space in innovation to say, why are we just always working one end, and why don't we come back and fundamentally look at redesigning something that could be actually fit for purpose?
Right, so a follow-up question to something that was just raised earlier. Jay, you mentioned corporate America, and you mentioned your mother. It's like the third time she's being mentioned tonight.
She worked in corporate America one time, right?
Perhaps,
So
yeah. So we can see both of them as security consumers, right? And there's a wide spectrum between the two. Now, most cybersecurity startups and entrepreneurs in the crowd try to sell their products to corporate America, but what about the others? What about small, medium businesses? What about private consumers? Who is going to serve them? Do you think there's a big opportunity for startups to address these massively underserved sectors? And what's the right way to do it? Perhaps we'll hear the investors' point of view and then others.
Well, it's in some ways it's a tougher nut to crack because you've got a very large, fragmented, dispersed market, and so it always comes down to capital and go-to-market approach. And what are you going to provide a consumer or SMB that might not realize that it has the problem? So you're not going to have a lot of demand, a lot of pull there. So those are two big problems right off the bat. What are you going to provide them with? How are they going to manage it? As Andy said, what happens when the alert goes off? Who are they going to call? So I think in some ways, there are cybersecurity consultants out there. There are the MSSPs. I think a sort of managed service approach might be the best solution for that.
they're all screwed, totally. We trained them to be screwed too, particularly in the United States. Credit card companies, the fact that there's no liability whatsoever for any kind of fraudulent charge or whatsoever, up to $50, I never pay it, I get it reimbursed. It takes me 3 seconds. It took them longer actually to steal the money from me than it did for me to get my credit back. It means I'm completely trained to not pay anything for security, because I think about that as the same. So, and at least in the US, we screwed ourselves. In Brazil, on the other hand, you're totally fucked. If your money gets stolen, you're liable for it, and you have to go fight for it. It's a pain. So they have a different mindset about how they protect themselves. And the banking system is very different. So I think it's cultural, but since you mentioned the US market, I'm speaking about the US market at least. I think that the most underserved market, though, in security is the small and medium-sized business owners. They are absolutely screwed because there's no distribution channel to get to them to be able to provide them a solution that's investable today that I know about. I've had 3 meetings about this, not related to the cyber competition, this week alone. I didn't even know I was walking into S&B meetings. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'm glad we're talking about it, but I don't really know how to push it over the line. And apologies for the guy in the room that's one of the 3 meetings I had. I think your idea is great. I just don't know how we get it in front of the customer right now. So you, on the other hand, are the only company that maybe can help the consumer out. So here we go.
With that setup, I feel compelled to jump into this discussion. So we, as I'm sure you know, a $2+ billion business inside of selling to the consumer around security. And I think that business really is morphing. If you look at it 2 years ago, what was it about? It was about Norton on the endpoint. But if I look at it today, it's actually very different. My mom, it's 5th reference, just not counting, but 5th reference.
Is she gonna walk
hey,
in
Mom.
any minute?
No, I'm going to wave to her on the Facebook Live.
My mom.
Yeah. Okay, my and Jay's mom. So our moms, It's interesting in the sense how she doesn't understand the security implications of what's going on in the world. If she opens any news site, I can guarantee you on almost every single day of the week, there is a cyber-related story. We know there was a huge one yesterday, as an example. But I think it was 2 weeks ago when WannaCry was happening, all 5 stories that were the top 5 on the BBC had something to do with cyber. So even if she doesn't understand exactly what's happening, what is a ransomware, and I don't like that guy, and that kind of stuff, she knows that there are security issues happening, and so she's more sensitized in that way. I don't think she's making better security choices because of it, but she is looking for a partner in that process. And we think that if she is looking for a partner, she's going to go to a brand that she knows, right? So, but then I'll talk about how this fits into the startup ecosystem in a second. And what we're seeing is the opportunity to move well beyond an endpoint solution to a digital safety solution that is, maybe it has an incarnation on the endpoint. Maybe it also includes a secure router. Maybe it also has a privacy solution. Maybe it also has something that's going to protect her and monitor her personal data if it shows up in the dark web. And don't say it showed up in the dark web because she wouldn't know what to do about that, but actually take some action on her behalf. And we actually think that that is a very, very interesting market that's poised for growth. And in fact, we made a $2.3 billion bet on it 4 months ago when we acquired a company in the US called LifeLock that does identity threat protection and monitoring. And we think that there's a lot of things to annex in that space. So that being said, I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the startup community to look at these areas, privacy being a really important one.
Yeah, so I mean, we're actually not disagreeing, even though it sounded like we're disagreeing, because like LifeLock's a great example, though. It's people are buying. They're not buying security, though. They're buying protection for their identity. It's different. It's just like in a startup panel yesterday. I forgot who made it. One of my fellow judges here, so made the point with one of the companies. It was like, you don't need to sell security. You need to sell like IT performance enhancement or something like that, right? So for instance, my sister just texted me 2 days ago, and in fact, I should talk to you about this. And she's like, hey, my computer is not functioning very well. It's working really slow. Do you know a tool I can run that can figure out why it's running slow? I actually don't know exactly what to tell her, what's the best thing to do, because I'm sure she just needs to re-image the whole damn thing and start over, because she's probably infected. But the point is like, if you have an opportunity like to deploy a security solution through something that's going to improve the performance of your computer, right? So I think you got to attack the consumer audience by a different way. I don't think they'll buy security, but they'll buy something that's going to benefit them a different way. And I don't think that as much as people know about security, the point you made, they're not doing anything about it. They're just more aware, right?
And I think the opportunity there really is for artificial intelligence, and particularly a learning AI, to actually deliver the education and the training and the FAQ and the problem solving, and particularly one that could get to know your mother and actually her...
Really nice, really nice.
No, but if you look at it...
I would love her.
Yeah,
next year she'll be on the panel.
Yeah, but
Please.
A good chatbot can talk to 10,000 people simultaneously and never takes a holiday and works around the clock. So I think that in terms of delivering on the after-sale service, in terms of delivering on the constant need to go back and revisit and what do I do now or what do my sister does, your sister, sorry, that's a great role for a really smart learning AI.
Okay, great. So let's open up the Q&A for the audience. So anyone would like to ask a question? Doran?
Thank you. Question to Andy and Hugh. You both support endpoint security. I have an issue with that. I have so many endpoints. I'm using my iPhone, using my laptop, home PC, my daughter's laptop sometimes, and even have receiving some messages over WhatsApp on my TV. How do you expect that you will tell my daughter to install an endpoint security product from a corporate? That wouldn't work. So what is your vision on that?
Andy?
Okay, so I'll start this one. And I'm going to use my father rather than my mother. No. So actually, very, very serious. When everybody uses an anecdote of their less than competent relative, they always pick a female. Cut it out. Okay?
Hey,
Stop it.
Hey.
Pick on the men.
My mom, again,
I know.
an attack on my mom
Yeah,
from
no,
the
attack
second
on you.
one on
Pick-
the panel.
Like,
Okay.
pick on your dad. Pick on your uncle. I don't care. It's old. We gotta kill that.
My sister really did
But I believe. Look, I believe
It's my
you.
mom that calls me.
I believe you, and it can be a challenge, but like make one up. You can use me as your brother. The place that you first need to start from is to say the endpoint shouldn't actually matter that much. One of the reasons that the endpoint matters is because we believed that firewalls were helpful. Right? And what firewalls are really good at is sort of containing the damage, but they're not really good at stopping the harm. And so the first step is to move to a point, look, I've got my phone right here. From my phone, I can like access my admin, like she puts in her time card, I can access it, I can approve it. Everything is right here because I'm doing it over a web app with cert-based authentication, with a push to notify me, and that's it. It's a web-based app. I'm not doing something custom that's on my corporate network. I don't VPN from here. So if this device gets compromised, the amount of damage it can cause is so small compared to a desktop that sits inside your corporate environment on the same VLAN as your billing database. Like, this is the real problem of endpoint, is that in many cases we are asking the endpoint to protect your crown jewels somewhere else. No, the endpoint should not have access to that. So that's where you need to start from. And then you have to say, okay, given that we want to protect the endpoints, we will assume they will be compromised in some fashion because we'll convince the user to click a thing or grant a permission, or it's going to be on your WhatsApp on your TV. I'm boggled at that one. I don't have good advice for you there. And so we have to say, how do we minimize the damage? Like, how do we do things like say, hey, only have the last 30 days of mail on your phone. Like, your laptop can go look back into your archives, but if your phone gets compromised, the amount of embarrassing things that get out is pretty small. Because that's what we actually care about realistically with email disclosures. Like, somebody compromises your email, the biggest harm you're going to have is like when Sony reveals that, oh, look, they're total jerks at the time. There's a whole bunch of folks who admitted that they said, oh, we're going to pay all the female stars way less than we pay the male stars, and we're cool with that. And they wrote it down. Like, if you're going to be sexist, don't write it down, and don't keep it forever. We're Facebook. No, I'm happy for this to be on Facebook.
Broadcast it live on Facebook.
Look, you'll find it on the dark web. I've got a screenshot on my phone right now. There's the dark web.
Kids, do not try this at home.
So I think my answer is we're not going to be able to protect every one of those endpoints, and we shouldn't expect to. What we should be able to say is that the unacceptable losses that will happen to us due to compromise of your television are small. And today, like, if you plugged your television into the corporate network and open to the internet, you're kind of screwed. So the unacceptable losses are so high that you shouldn't do that. It's about the architecture.
But when your data is moving to the cloud, but when your data is hosted in the cloud, in cloud applications, and you can access corporate data from any device, and I do that on a regular basis, what do you do then?
Okay. If I may.
I like that the cloud guy took the endpoint thing, and the endpoint guy's taking the cloud thing. This is awesome.
I am the everything guy, not the endpoint guy. But it's very interesting, I'd say, how you pose that question. And having your daughter as kind of part of that equation is an issue that's very near and dear to me. So I have a massive set of children at home. A 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 2 18-month-old twins. And I constantly think about, what is going to happen when my 6-year-old presses the button down a little longer than she should on the phone that she stole from a counter and asks Siri for something and some weird picture comes up, right? For me, that's a very serious threat because that's traumatic. So I think about that all the time. And if you think about many things moving to the cloud and you accessing those cloud-based services from a diversity of endpoints, some of which will not be agentable for a whole bunch of reasons, right? Like the TV as an example. Then you need to start thinking about the life of a packet that you care about. Where does that packet originate from? Where does it go to? And what does it move through? And I think that calculus has changed dramatically over the last 5 years, even for a packet that has enterprise data. A firewall often isn't in that equation today when you're outside of the corporate network, right? Firewall, very important piece of infrastructure. But what is in that equation? Endpoints in the equation, right? But again, some endpoints are not agentable. You don't want to agent them. Then what is between you and the cloud-based service, CASB, as an example, it could be one of those things. And when we think about that life of a packet, we think about the multitude of places where you can potentially get control. And I don't think endpoint is the silver bullet in this space. I think we need to be thinking about endpoint for sure. I think we need to be thinking about cloud-based solutions. I think we need to be thinking as diverse as possible to get in that path of the life of the packet. And there's a lot of innovation still to be done in that space.
The question is for Jay. Although, for
Can
everybody
we get
else.
another glass of Sauvignon Blanc from the bar for Jay? He's going to need it for this question.
So you talked about third-party liability, and it's a big topic I'm dealing with. And I want to hear what you think about where the world is going in terms of accountability and liability. Are we going to hold the people that produce products, devices, more accountable to outbreaks like Wi-Fi or others that take advantage of endpoints in home environments but have an effect on our entire infrastructure?
The headline now, Leek said.
Yeah, there you go. Leek said, I have no idea what you're talking about. No, so, yeah, your question went a different way than I thought. Ah, perfect, thank you. All right, it's going to get more interesting now. All right, now I'll give you an answer. No, in all seriousness, I think what you're talking about is so theoretical and so much of a utopia because there's no real way to link that back today. It goes to what I'm saying. So we don't really know who our supply chain is. We have an idea, you pick, I'm not going to pick on any particular company right now since you're streaming me on Facebook right now, but let's just say I've talked to literally hundreds of companies as Mark was part of founding this company over the past few years. And, we've talked to small companies that have 10,000 vendors, and we've talked to large companies that have 300,000 vendors, all right? And you go, all right, well, who are you giving your data to for XYZ reasons? And I go, well, we're giving it to these vendors. And all of a sudden you're like, well, what about your black car vendors? Why are you giving them that data? Well, I'm not giving them that data. Yes, I am. And all of a sudden you realize that things that you're doing from a third-party perspective is just, you have no idea where it's going or why it's even going. And then what you really don't have any visibility into is the fourth-party risk that vendor then is outsourced. Like, it's almost impossible to link back accountability, with the exception of, you blended the question, and you're like, are we going to hold vendors or something responsible? And at the end of the day, I'm going to vote on the side of, no, we're not going to, because we're so busy chasing our tail doing other things that we're never going to get around to it. And, and there's going to be some lawyer that's going to hold them responsible in a class action lawsuit, and they're going to make money, and none of us are going to benefit from that. So that's my take on it. Someone else with a better view on that than me?
Well, I think that as a venture community, you should be terrified of this idea, right? Because startups write crap code. No offense, you should. If you write high quality code, somebody's going to beat you to market, right? You write code that has vulnerabilities and has defects in it because your risk tolerance is high because you're all dying. If you're a startup, you probably can do the math to say, on that date, we're out. Unless we can convince Ofer to give us a little more, and he's going to say, go get some, which usually we do if it's a good company. But you know this, and so you're going to take those shortcuts, because if you spend an extra month getting to market so that you can do some better code review, well, that's a month you don't get back that is critical. And the problem is, for every successful startup that makes it through, there's 99 that don't, for which this was a great choice. We learned a lot, and their code went away, and there's no residual risk. And that 1 in 100 ends up being like Uber or somebody else. Sorry, I'm not supposed to pick on anybody, but I think Uber is safe these days. Where the amount of risk is so massive that everybody now inherits. But if at that point you said, oh, well, everybody who invested in Uber, sorry, because they made these bad choices, we're going to take all their money away in the class action lawsuit, well, that makes it a lot harder to justify the investing. And if we don't have the investing, it means we don't have the innovation. And if we don't have the innovation, then we're not going to be able to live in Mary's dream world, which I love, which says, how do we get to the next stage and not just try to incrementally improve, but have these massive upgrades? So I think liability at this systemic way would get in the way. Plus, it's a really hard problem. If I write a web server and open source it, and then you decide to add the web server in your diagnostics package, which then Jay decides to put on an embeddable Linux system, which then Hugh decides to make in a heart monitor, who is responsible for the bug in my web server running on your heart?
You.
Yeah, I figured that's what Jay was going to give me, right? But this is a really complicated problem. Like, at what point in this complex system? In the United States, we look at automobile safety, and I don't know how many people know the story of the Ford Pinto. That about 30 years ago, the Ford Pinto had to be recalled because the engineers made what is very clearly and obviously a stupid mistake. They put the gas tank at the very back of the car. So when it got rear-ended by a car behind it, well, the first thing that happened was you ruptured the fuel tank, and that usually involves a spark, and now the car explodes. And that's a simple problem that I explained it to you. Does anybody in here not understand why this is a bad idea? Great, thank you. The Jeep Cherokee that can be taken over at 70 miles an hour because there's only one network bus for weight limitation, weight in the car. That network bus is connected to the internet so you can get software updates and streaming in information to your entertainment dash, and at the same time it includes the apps to be able to control things. Does anybody here actually feel that they understand exactly where the bad choice in there was that was made? Because I don't. It's a bunch of choices that all make sense at the time that they were made, and it's only in aggregate that the system is complicated enough that somebody can take over the Jeep at 70 miles an hour and do things to it, which is horrible. Like, this is an unacceptable loss, but there is not a single place you can look at and say, well, that's the engineer who did the bad thing. The system's too complex, and that's where we are today. The system is too complex for anybody, and like Jay keeps pointing this out, like, we don't know who our counterparties are, partly because we have so many of them, and they have counterparties that we rely on.
But that's not going to change. In fact, it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse by far. Other questions?
Other questions from the crowd?
Next question. Here we go.
Guys, thanks for coming to Israel. It's lovely to hear you guys here. Question in regards to what I was hearing here for the past hour or so was mainly around passive cyber defense. And I would like to hear a bit more about what your thoughts around active cyber defense.
Bad idea.
Dual purpose we're talking about, not active, dual purpose.
Dual purpose.
Let's just be clear. I'm from the nation that is the only nation that did not renounce the ability to issue letters of marque and reprisal. The US never renounced that. I would love one personally. I think it's a horrible idea. Corporations and private actors should never engage in offensive action outside their perimeter. That is the principal function of a nation state and not the function of an entity. And plus, attribution is hard and you will get it wrong. And while I just went on a rant about how liability is a hard problem, when you break into a machine that is keeping somebody alive in a hospital to keep that machine from DOSing you, you turn it off and kill somebody, you should go to jail. and you will. And so I don't want private companies to be in that position. That's what we have 8200 and the NSA and the Department of Defense for. Let them go do it. It's their mission to go kill people, not ours.
Any other comments?
Oh, come on. I'm trying to
All right. Any more questions from the crowd? No. So I would like to round up the discussion with a quick. Just get the mic.
This is my mic.
I have one mic.
Where's your mic? Oh, it went out there.
Very quickly, one piece of advice from you to all the entrepreneurs, the Israeli entrepreneurs in the audience. Quickly, each one of you, please.
One piece of advice?
Only one, Andy.
So I think the one piece of advice is going to be focus. Right? There's a lot of opportunities out there, and you're going to be able to say, look, I could use this technology in 85 different ways. Focus on what the business wants, who's going to buy your technology. Like, sometimes your technology is just a feature, and that's okay. But you should focus on how is it going to get out? How am I going to get my customers? Because sometimes you'll say, look, there are 85 different ways that people could use it. Well, if you walk in and you try to sell me that your product will do 85 different things, and you're not already like Symantec, who I know does at least 84 things, like, I'm not going to believe you. Oh, it's 86 today? Okay. So focus. Figure out what you're going to be good at. And if it turns out after trying to sell to 10 people you're not good at that, change which thing you focus on. Learn to pivot. You're all wonderful innovators. But focus and execute.
Focus. All right, Mark.
Before you spend a lot of time and money on a very creative, innovative idea, no matter how creative and innovative it is, go out and make sure that there's actually a market for it, that there are actually customers for it, and that it's actually solving a problem in the market, because no matter how great a piece of technology you create, if the customers aren't there, then it's a lot of wasted effort.
So market validation. Right, Mary.
I would say in terms of creativity is don't be afraid to design into your own creativity. And don't be afraid to actually listen to your intuition. Intuition is a uniquely human trait that actually differentiates us from machines. And Maury, the great robotic scientist who actually coined the phrase the uncanny valley, he said, don't be afraid to listen to the little things. So if something feels right and you've got a hunch, you can design incrementally. You can look at what everybody else is doing, and then you can try to do it a little better or a little better. Or you can take an intuitive, assumptive leap and get ahead of everybody else. So listen to the little things.
Intuition, right. Hugh.
Yeah, I want to double down on Mark's comment. I think, just having talked to many folks in the startup space here in Israel, ideas, super talented people, incredible competency. That's not a problem. Abundance of it. And then, a very interesting question comes down to, is it consumable in the market? And that's a very important question that those of us that are technologists don't like to think about a lot, because we know it's a super cool solution. I would buy one. My mom would buy one. My dad would buy one. Even my cousin, I think would buy one, although he might have been inebriated when he responded to that survey I sent him. So, I feel good about that, but I actually need to make sure that the market is ready to digest it, both in terms of skill sets that the operators may have. Do they understand it? Can they use it? Do they have the right level of competency? And then, does it have a messageability in it that can differentiate it from a whole bunch of other products that sound similar to a buyer that really doesn't have the ability to go in and do a massive amount of diligence and a bake-off? And so I'd encourage you to really think about, how do you test the marketability of those great ideas, and is it time for it yet or not?
You got a lot of these ability words like agent ability and all this. Well, it's great. So, yeah. So anyways, sidebar. It's really, you do 87. Real time company. So I break the market as earlier. don't know if I said recovering or reformed, I haven't figured it out, CISO, but also as an investor, I still break the market up into 4 different sectors. You have the mega platforms, such as my friend saying next to me here, which are not, by design, not a startup, right? Even though you guys are the closest thing to it, actually. But still, mega platforms. And you have many platforms, point solutions, and product features, right? There's nothing wrong with being any one of those other 3. Now, obviously, as an investor, I'm looking for the mini platform, and very few startups out of the gate really are mini platforms or even truly understand how to become one. They might grow into one, right? Even, you know, a few more are point solutions, and point solutions can be fantastic. Some of the best technologies I ever bought and deployed as a CISO or you know, running security program for any organization were point solutions, and I can name, you know, tons of vendors that never grew anything more than to be a point solution. I can talk about there's a company that went public earlier this year in security that is a point solution by my definition, at least. It's not a platform, and it's worth $1 billion, all right? So it can be great, all right? And there's product features, all right? Now, out of the 2,500 companies that are in the world today in security, maybe 2,600, something like that, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say 90+% of them are product features. Let's face it, all right? So the likelihood of you being a feature is very high, all right? So what you need to do as an entrepreneur, and what I encourage people to do to my detriment as an investor, is to accept, if you're a feature, accept it. Or say, you know what, I know how to turn my feature into a point solution, that's great. But if you're truly a feature, and you really don't know how to take it to a point solution, today you own more of your company than you'll ever own in your entire life, all right? So do the math before you raise your next round, and make sure you really can grow it to be big enough to where you're gonna make more money in your next round. Even if you're talking to me, make sure you're gonna make more money, and make sure the work is actually worth it, because there might be a buyer today at something that might make you more money personally as a founder, entrepreneur, so forth and so on. I know I'm saying it to my detriment, but just you got to think about that. And there's one guy in particular, and it's funny, I actually am an investor now in him. I told him, I said, your product's a feature, I highly recommend that you sell. I introduced him to 3 CEOs of 3 companies, and he refused to talk to him. He said, I'm absolutely not. And it actually like lit a fire in his ass, and the guy today is a mini platform. All right, he just took it to the next level. It's awesome, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that told him that, so I don't take any credit whatsoever for it. You know, but that seldom happens, right? And, you know, and I thought he was making a huge mistake. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but sometimes, like, you know, you need to internalize that and understand what you need to do to take it to the next level before you just go out and raise more money.
So the moral is not listen to you, Jack.
Never listen to me.
One piece of advice.
One piece of advice, for sure. I have a lot of people that have learned that the hard way, too.
Okay. Great, guys. So this has been a real honor, interesting, and I'm sure that everybody... So I want to thank you very much for this interesting panel. Thank you for the crowd, and see you next year.